The flooding of 97, the ever-present rain. I remember being at home on a weekend when it started, and it just wouldn't stop. I noticed my yard, when the water started coming up in the yard, then over my driveway. We had never seen that. We'd lived on our house in a while. It was sort of a harbinger of a bigger thing to come in my mind, just from living here all my life. And it turned out to be with the Ohio River. You know, it's rare that they put the floodgates in action. That's a big event in this city. And they are able to tell you days, sometimes a week or so in advance, we're going to put the floodgates in because of the way of the Ohio River and its ebb and flow. And when they alerted us that the floodgates would be going in to protect downtown Louisville, it caught everybody's attention. I've seen all the old news film from 1937 and the Great Flood and how we weren't protected by floodgates. And of course, the city here has done a great job telling you why those floodgates are so important and how when we use them, that means we're going to have some flooding that we would consider close to major in today's modern times. 1997, the floodwaters did not come into the heart of downtown Louisville, but they certainly wreaked their havoc along River Road. I mean, shutting down businesses. Popular restaurants couldn't reopen for weeks. It was a devastating flood. Was to get the viewers into the flood and show the impact directly. There is a hotel at River Road and Zorn Avenue. The waters came up so fast, it surrounded the hotel with the guests inside. But it stopped short because it's built up on a berm. The guests, they had plenty of activity. They had plenty of activities, and they had plenty of food and water. So what we did is we got somebody with a canoe, and we picked it up, probably up Zorn Avenue a little bit, and we canoed into the hotel to tell the story of the stranded guests there and what they were doing, how they were biding their time, and they were playing board games, they were reading books, they were watching the television news and that. And we actually, at the time the cigar craze was big, I took them some of the guests' cigars at the time. We took them things there when we went and to help tell the story. And then growing up here, I grew up on the Ohio River. My friends were boaters, my dad had a boat. I knew the rhythms of the river, and I had talked to a lot of the old captains of the river, including the Belle of Louisville's captain. I grew up going on that boat and that. And so I wanted to get out on the river to show what it was like at the full swell of the river. Right as it was peaking, we did an hour-long special at like 8 o'clock at night on one of the days, many days into the flooding. And so what I did was I got a towboat captain, one of those giant towboats, because I knew it would be able to fight the current in the river and those big trees that were coming down. And I got a live crew, a team of a few photographers and me. We got out to the towboat, which wasn't easy in itself. It was moored up by captain's quarters. But to get to it, we also had to take a canoe out to a little small runabout to get on board, hauled all our gear on there. And so during our live special at 8 o'clock that night, I was live in the middle of the river from the towboat's deck. I was able to show people what captain's quarters used to look like, where the Harrods Creek mouth ran into the Ohio River. Then we went down and showed the Louisville Water Company, the main icons, from the viewpoint of the flood. And we showed southern Indiana, Utica, Indiana, hit so hard during that 1997 flood. It was a perspective I was proud to be able to show, because we can show floodwaters from the air, but to be able to show it from the massive, powerful part of where that floodwater was at its roiling best was, to me, an accomplishment. Here in 2022, 97 is the worst. It's the top of the list for flooding in our community. I mean, we had the ice storm, we had the windstorm, we had the winter storm of 94. As a kid, I grew up living through the blizzard of 1978, when that's all we did was watch WHAS-11 and wait for that music to be played, Bella Via, the snow closing music. When they played that, we knew we had another day off from school. But flooding, I mean, we've all run to our basements for tornadoes. That flooding was just a one-of-a-kind of event, because it came out of a steady rainfall, a saturated ground base coming out of winter, and suddenly just overtook us with the Ohio River spilling out of its banks. I remember Good Morning America would use our live helicopter during their program when they came on at 7 a.m. And our helicopter was positioned right about over 12 Mile Island, maybe 6 Mile, looking back at downtown Louisville. Well, it made it look like the whole city had flooded, when we actually know it was the confines along the river, but it was a 100-year flood. It was extraordinary.
Now, anything from the Indiana side, that you remember from New Albany, Jeffersonville, and stuff like that you can kind of recall? You mentioned Utica.
Yes, we focused a lot on Utica on the upper gauge of the Ohio River. And because of that, the folks in Utica are river hardy. The river is their life. It is right there at their front door. It always has been. And they along with some of the river residents in Louisville, tend to stay in their homes. They want to stay at the last minute. And we did show the devastation there. It hit Utica hard. It had a hard time rebounding after 97.
And then I think, if I remember correctly, because I talked to one of our meteorologists who lived on the Indiana side. He was our hydrologist, Mike Callahan. He talked about how they were putting those gates up there too, even on that side, Jeffersonville, New Albany, trying to get that ready as well, and that doesn't happen very often. The
gates went up, and then the debris in the river became another story. The massive trees and refrigerators and giant appliances were floating down the river from God knows where they came from, but then were deposited right here. The trash removal became another big story afterwards.
These are all great. Anything else you want to add from your experience, both personal and even professional, that you think is important?
I judge every rainfall today by the 97 flood. I wonder, especially coming in the end of January into February and March, I'm really sensitive to that. How's our ground? How much rain have we had versus snow going into these key months when the Ohio River is most vulnerable? And I look at the steadiness of it now, especially with the volume of rain we're getting out of the sky now for just regular rainstorms. I wonder if we're really close to another 97 because of the capability of these rainstorms and even winter thunderstorms to drop huge amounts of rain in such a short time. I'm really surprised to this point that we have dodged another 97.
And then with that in mind, you were talking about something resonated with me. So give me a moment. It was there. What do you think this community and communities along the Ohio, and maybe even Louisville itself that you've seen, they learned from 97?
Well, from 97 and today, we learned that our pumping stations don't do a very good job around here right now, and that they're old and they're aging, and they were put in at a time when they were state-of-the-art, like in the 1950s, even predating that. And here we are in 2022. They're not used very much since 1997. We're really going to, if we ever get into a situation where we've got to have pumping station A, B, and C, and D, or whatever going all at the same time, but we've only got 2 to 3 online working, as we saw in the past flooding, then we're really, really in trouble. I think we've got a great system here of putting in the floodgates. I think 97 proved the valuable nature of those floodgates and how they did their job and how they actually could have taken more volume and even a higher flow of the river than they got the test in 97.